Some viewers may find the following video disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised.
As the altercation between Cheryl Ann Camesso and Warren Marshall would come to a head, they would begin arguing one night at Mons Venus Gentlemen's Club. Co-worker Heather Lane would actually come out there and try to stop the arguing and would say that she would lead off Cheryl Ann Camesso to get away from Warren Marshall. She would also be the one that would say it was after this incident that they never heard from Cheryl Ann Camesso again, and that's when shortly they heard less and less of Sharon Marshall and Warren Marshall. And it's around that time that Warren, Sharon, and Michael would actually be on their way to Oklahoma City, as we had talked about in the beginning of the videos. But before that, they would actually make a pit stop in New Orleans because Sharon would actually find herself pregnant again. And just like with her first pregnancy when she was in high school, Warren would tell her she was not allowed to keep the baby. So they would go to New Orleans as a way to find an adoption agency for someone to adopt the child. The adoption agency would actually reach out and they would actually find a woman by the name of Mary Dufresne. And she would be the one that would adopt the child that Sharon would have. She would also recall a time when she first met Sharon and Warren, and she wouldn't have many nice things to say about Warren because he was very adamant and very vocal about the only reason he wanted to be there was to get rid of the child and to make $7,000. She would say there was a brief moment after she would have the child and would ask if she wanted to hold the child, but Sharon would say that she couldn't do it, mainly because if she looked at that child, there was no way she would want to give that child up. Which speaks volumes about the kind of character that Sharon Marshall was. And after she would have this baby, Warren and Sharon would actually go to Oklahoma City where they would change their names again. And this time, this is where Sharon would go under the name Tanya Tadlock and Warren would go under the name as Clarence Hughes. And it's around this time that they would get married and play as husband and wife. And just like they did in Georgia and Tampa, Tanya would begin working at the Gentlemen's Club Passions. And again, Sharon would befriend another co-worker, this time a woman by the name of Karen Parsley. Now, Karen Parsley would be the woman that would actually call the actual Tanya Tadlock's mother and inform her about Sharon's unaliving or passing. Karen would say that she immediately connected with Sharon because they could just identify on so many levels about a lot of things. This is another thing that I found really interesting between Karen Parsley and Heather Lane was because they were completely drawn to Sharon, mainly because they identified with each other's trauma because they had gone through very similar things in their childhood. Karen would start noticing a lot of things. If Sharon didn't make a certain amount of money, she would actually find Sharon walking into the club the next following night with a lot of bruisings over her back and body, and would say she did everything in her power to try to get Sharon out of that lifestyle and away from her husband, but unfortunately it didn't happen. There is one bit of information we do know is that briefly before her passing, she actually started seeing a gentleman by the name of Kevin. And apparently Sharon was actually going to get with Kevin and they were actually going to get away from her abusive husband. And it said that Warren would actually find out, and soon after that, Sharon would mysteriously be ran over by a hit and run. I think we all know, even though it's never been confirmed, that Warren or Franklin Delano Floyd was the person that ran over Sharon. Now, back in 1994, once Special Agent Joe Fitzpatrick had collected all this information, he started putting all the puzzle pieces together to try and find Franklin Delano Floyd. One of the first things that Joe realized was that Franklin had been evading authorities and had been a fugitive for the last 17 years. One of the ways that he would do this is by jumping from state to state to state, never staying in the same place very long. And each time he changed a place, he would actually change his name. Not only had he gone under the name of Warren Marshall and Clarence Hughes, but he would also go under the names Trenton Davis and Morgan Floyd. And knowing this, Special Agent Joe Fitzpatrick would actually go to the various states, Utah, Kentucky, Georgia, and Florida, and would actually put these names through the DMV and see if there was going to be a renewal of any of these names. And sure enough, within a matter of days, they would find out that Franklin Floyd tried to renew a license for, yet again, Warren Marshall. So without wasting any more time, Special Agent Joe Fitzgerald would actually hop on a plane over to Kentucky so that they could apprehend and arrest Franklin Delano Floyd. They would apprehend and arrest Franklin Delano Floyd, but unfortunately, when they arrested him, Michael was nowhere to be seen. And when they arrested him, they would charge him with multiple counts of kidnapping and arson. Just for the kidnapping charge alone, he would get about 5 years. And for the kidnapping with gunpoint, he could get up to 25 years. Warren would act as his own attorney, but was not expecting one of the key witnesses that they would actually bring to the stand. And that would be none other than Sharon's high school best friend, Jenny Fisher. When Jenny Fisher would take the stand, Franklin would actually approach Jenny Fisher and would be like, did you come to a conclusion or make your opinion about me through the FBI? And it's at this point that Jenny Fisher would say, I drew my opinion on you when you started buying the lingerie for your daughter and dressing her the way you did. She would actually go further and say, you were her father. What father would do this to their daughter? The picture above is actually Sharon when she was in high school, and that's how her father, Warren Marshall, would actually dress her. The jury would actually convict Warren Marshall or Franklin Delano Floyd guilty of the charges, and they would give him 52 years. But Special Agent Joe Fitzpatrick was not done with Franklin Delano Floyd. You see, after they arrested Franklin Delano Floyd, they would actually go to where Franklin had gotten a bus ticket, which was in Georgia. And they would go over to Georgia, and sure enough, they would find the truck that Franklin Delano Floyd was using, and he ditched it in Georgia as he got his bus ticket to Kentucky. And they would look underneath this truck, and they would find a plethora of photos duct taped underside the truck. And it was a plethora of corn-type portraits of Sharon, going as far back as young as 4 years old. But they would also find portraits in there that was also very alarming. Joe Fitzpatrick would say there were photos of an unknown woman, and she was in various stages of assault. He would later claim there was no reason, as badly as she was beaten, that Franklin Delano Floyd was going to let her go alive. And in the various stages of assault and undress that she was in, she was also on a hide-a-bed in a trailer. And Michael's old babysitter, Michelle Couples, would actually confirm when she would be shown the pictures, would say, yes, that's most definitely the trailer that Franklin Delano Floyd and Sharon stayed at. And she said that she would notice that hide-a-bed anywhere as she was there over 7 times a day. But just to be extra sure, Joe Fitzpatrick would actually send these photos all over to just different various states just so he couldn't pinpoint, where this was going down. And sure enough, when Joe Fitzpatrick would send these photographs to the different various states that they had been in, they would get a call back from authorities in Florida and Tampa. And they would confirm that they had an unidentified body that had been there since 1995. And the clothing on that body matched the clothing that was found inside those pictures. And that person was none other than Cheryl Ann Camesso. So they connected the dots, and they quickly identified Jane Doe I-275 as Cheryl Ann Camesso. So Joe would get together and they would charge Franklin Delano Floyd again, but this time for the unaliving of Cheryl Ann Camesso. And with all of the evidence that they had, they could actually charge him for the death penalty, and he could actually suffer by lethal injection. And they, again, were also very successful, and they would charge Franklin Delano Floyd guilty and would sentence him to death by lethal injection. But Joe Fitzpatrick's question was still looming. Where was Michael Hughes, and who was Sharon Marshall?